And then you should be able to share now.
All right, what do we want to start with?
Let's start in Blackbaud, and we'll just kind of work through some of the basics over there.
So is that
perfect? That
good?
looks fantastic. So do you mind if I request remote control from your side?
No, go ahead, right ahead.
All right, perfect. Okay, awesome. So really, very, very, very beginning when we're diving in and looking at this is that we want to just make sure that we have access to the web services API manager role. If we don't, then a lot of what we're doing here, we can't do in an automated way, but we can do still by exporting data and then feeding it to Power BI. So I'll look at that a little bit later, but for now, from security, if we go into the roles section, and if I just search for web, then we are looking great. So that fact that that web services API manager role exists means that we're able to leverage the on API to pull the data through to Power BI. So that's step one, just making sure that we have access to the role. Step two is that we create a user where the only role that that user has is that web services API manager role. We don't assign a Blackbaud ID to them. We don't make it so that they could ever actually log into the site, but we're just going to create a dummy user over here. And Susan, you can clean all this up later. If you don't want it there, I'm happy to stick around and clean it up.
Oh, and that right there was one thing I didn't know, because I had created that API Tiger that I was on.
Yeah.
The one that I created and gave the web API role, but then I had read that it should also have like platform manager and some other roles. So you're saying no, just
no, because really the only reason that this user exists is to pull the very specific lists that we share with that role. So we don't want them to ever have any permissions beyond just grabbing the very specific lists that we share through the API. So there's no immediate harm in doing it, but I just don't want someone to stumble over that user record and use it as a way to dig into your system.
Gotcha.
So I just call it, PBI and then data. And then the only thing that we do with that thing is we don't give it an email address. We don't give it any access to anything else. We just go into the role membership and we'll edit the role membership, and we will just give it that web services API manager role. So steps 1 and 2, pretty boring, but really important. And then from there, let me just make sure nobody's in the waiting room here. Sorry. I'm going to exit the full screen. Okay, perfect. Not seeing anybody there.
And Matt, quick question while you're just checking the waiting room.
Yeah.
I'm following along in ours, and the user that's set up for that, we actually have the account login disabled. That's okay, right?
Yeah. So
because
if it's been working on the back end, that's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But because we're not assigning a Blackbaud ID, they could never actually log in. So
exactly,
should work as one and the same there.
It just popped up in an audit we did that user has no login credentials but wasn't disabled, so we went ahead and disabled it. So that made everybody happy, because like, okay, this account, nobody can do anything with it, but it works in the background. So I just wanted to make sure.
Beautiful. Yeah. So as long as your admissions and this report are still working, then that's fantastic.
Good.
So that's a great segue into the next piece. So once we've created that user record within security in the authentication settings, we need to set that user up, that new user record, to be able to use the on API access. And because we gave it that web services API manager role, it's showing here as being potentially available, but it has not had the key or the secret assigned. So what I'm going to do right now with Susan is generate that key and that secret. Because it's in the recording, Susan, after we wrap up, we're immediately going to regenerate it just so that nobody could stumble over that key and secret and jump into the list data that we're looking at. So I'm going to tell it to generate. And that's all I'm doing to tell it to generate is clicking on those 3 dots, clicking generate, and it'll create the key and the secret that can be used for 365 days. So what we're going to do is I'm going to copy this guy, the key. And Susan, do you have just like a notepad or something we could throw that into, or a Word doc or an email or something?
I usually will do them in here.
Perfect.
None of that.
Awesome. So we'll just say, oops, sorry. And then the secret is, where are we? Here we go. And then we'll copy the secret. Paste it there. And then once we hit save, that actually makes those valid. So at any point in time, which Susan and I will do after we wrap up, just so nobody can stumble into the back end of her database, is we can come back in and regenerate those at any time, and it'll create fresh credentials. Every year, you've got to go through that process just because Blackbaud depreciates the sign-in after a year. So at this point, we've got the user, we've given it the role it needs, we've given it permission to access data through the on API. And then really the next piece is we need to build the list that contains the data that we want to pull out. So Susan, do you know if at your school, if they're using that major assignment tag on any assignments? I know that was the initial email, but I'm not sure.
We do use that tag. How many it will generate, I don't know, but
Okay.
yeah,
Beautiful. So let's dive in and find out.
Matt, it's Anne-Marie. Can you do me a favor? I don't have the on API tab that you have there.
Yes. So that is, you probably don't have the web services API manager, or do you have it from your side?
On my personal account or on like our site?
In your system, like, do you have access to that role?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, awesome. If you have that role, there's one more role that, so Susan must have this role. Good point. So let me walk you through one more thing here. If we look at Susan's permissions here, and if we look at her access, then if we look at her role membership, there is a role, I think it's like on API Access Manager. So Anne-Marie, if you give yourself that on API Access Manager role, or ask whoever manages it to give you that role, yep. Log out, log back in, then you should see that piece within the security authentication settings.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So let's jump over to manage lists. And sometimes this can be the scariest part of the whole process. If you don't spend a lot of time in advanced lists, this can be a bit of a bear. But we're just going to start fresh. And I have wasted thousands of hours of my life back here, so I can spin these up pretty quickly. And actually, John, I'm going to go steal what I used at Thayer, not show it on the screen, but just kind of get the structure in place so that I can see what we're looking at there.
Steal away. It's all yours. While you're copying that, I'm going to give a shameless plug for another of Matt's creations with he created an enrollment dashboard for us using advanced list and feeding into PowerBI. And I'm actually presenting tomorrow at BB Dev Days, showing his enrollment dashboard and what we've sort of attempted to replicate in Blackbaud analysis to match his dashboard and do a couple other things.
Awesome.
Very exciting.
Good. All right. So I'm just going to grab the list structure that we've already used over here. And you guys follow this recording later or grab a screenshot as we're going through, but you should be able to build an almost identical list to gather the same data. So we start with assignment. And where does assignment live? So let's find that out. Probably in grading, maybe. Gradebook. Yeah, there we go. So we've got assignment. Actually, nope, that's not it. It's not gradebook assignment. Let's find it. Is
it under academic?
It might be buried in academics. That would make sense, wouldn't it? Yes, thank you. Assignment. And then we need the assignment type. And then from there, what did we do? I grabbed a user base. And for those of you, if you haven't spent a lot of time in these advanced lists, what we're doing now is just telling this list which tables in the back end of the system contain the data that we want to be able to use in building our list. So I've got the user base, and then we're going to get the course group. And the first time I built this, it probably took 3 hours to figure out how to find what I was looking for. But once you've got it, you've got it. From the course group, we're going to grab the course base. We're going to grab the course term. And then we're going to grab course enrollment. And then we're going to tie that to the course group. And then from there, under the course enrollment, I'm going to grab the user base for the students themselves. So under constituent information, we're going to tack on the user base. And all of these being inner joins is fine. It behaves differently in a lot of cases if it's checked or not checked. But in this case, because we're only looking for those major assignments, leaving everything checked is totally fine. In my display fields, we're going to grab a whole bunch of things. The display fields just determines what's going to be the output in our advanced list. So within assignment, we're going to go into assignment due date, assignment brief. And this may vary slightly school to school, just depending on how much detail teachers are plugging in within the assignments. The assignment type, we're going to grab the assignment type. And then we'll grab that major piece as well so that we can filter out whether it's marked as a major or non-major assignment. In that first user base, we're grabbing the first name, last name, and email. We could add any other fields we want. So if we wanted additional teacher info, we could certainly pull it. And then within the course group, we're going to get the group identifier. And then in the course base, we're going to grab the course code, the course title. And then in the last, did I do anything with the term? I guess we didn't do anything with the term, or might have pulled that out. Course enrollment. I think I probably used that as a filter later. Course enrollment. Leave that alone. Where's my second user base? Oh, there we go. So under course enrollment, then I can get to my user base. And we'll grab the user ID, first name, last name, and I grabbed the grad year. We could grab the student's email as well if there's any value in having that, but yeah, probably not for these purposes. And then all the hit select, and those become the fields that we're going to feed through the API out to Power BI. My filters, I've got the assignment type major is true. So I just want to make sure we're only grabbing those that are marked as major assignments. The assignment due date, and this is one that with John, we've made a couple updates at Thayer with different points during the year. We may want to see different date ranges for this, but I'm going to grab the assignment due date. And I'll just do what did we do here? Within. And I'll go to, I don't know, 8/1 of 22 until say 6/15 of 23, and just adjust that for whatever your school year looks like. And then course-based school level. So when we set this up with John at Thayer, or John's predecessor at Thayer, we were only concerned with the middle school at the time. But Susan, would there potentially be major assignments across all divisions?
Mainly middle and high school, yeah.
Okay, we'll just leave that filter off, and we'll just be able to pull that out. And then I want to make sure the course enrollment dropped tag isn't in place. So if a student was enrolled in the course but is no longer enrolled in the course, I just want to make sure that we don't include them as having a major assignment if they're no longer enrolled. And that is course enrollment dropped. There we go. And then I'm going to say equal to 0. And then really, that's it. So I've got my my list. Let's preview it and just make sure we get something. Maybe that didn't click. Let's try.
No, it's going. It's just
Okay. Sorry. Maybe a lot of major assignments floating back there.
very possible.
So Carolyn's question there, if we put the dropped equals to 0, that's fine, because it's looking at the specific enrollments in the specific course, and not any enrollments tied to anything else. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to save and exit this and just actually we'll give it a name. So generally I'll throw like a PBI. And then we're going to come back in, and Kathy Steinman, who's on this call, had the brilliant idea of putting the ID, which we'll need later, into the name of the title. So we're going to pull that in. I'm going to just mess up everything on Susan's computer. I'm going to create a new one called PBI. And then if I save and exit, a lot of times I can still pull data even if the preview is not working. So let's see if we can make that work. So I'm going to see if I can just run it directly from here.
The other thing I like to do is if I have to adjust the dates, I put change dates in the name. So when I'm looking at all my advanced lists, I know which ones I have to update every year.
I like it. All right. I bet it'll still feed some data. I'm not sure why that's not running though. There we go. Oh boy, 55,000 rows. Okay, so that's good. They are using that major assignment marker. So
Because you've included the student names. If you'd not included the student names, it would have pulled, right, just one assignment per.
correct. So because we pulled the student name, but I think one of the benefits that we found, at least on the Thayer side, and I've built this a few more times since then, is that it's nice to be able to filter by student and see which student has which major assignment as you're cross-checking against classes, but certainly don't need it. Just could be a helpful tool. But that's great. It's showing us what we need to see. So then I'm going to go back to the list and just do a little bit more plumbing. We've got that list created. This list ID, which I literally just noticed for the first time right now, and that's so helpful. This is the little snippet that I need to have for my code that I'm feeding into Power BI. Let me just make sure if I hover over edit, that that's the same thing I see at the bottom. Yeah, that is fantastic. So I'm going to copy this guy. And actually, maybe that makes it so that we don't need to do this step, but we're going to do it anyways. I'm just going to put that into the title because it's searchable. So if I ever needed to go back and look for it, then I know what's there. And then the very, very last step is, or the last step within Blackbaud is that we need to share this specific list with that web services API manager role. Yeah, Grace, I just saw your note. I was literally doing this an hour ago and I did not see it. So I don't know if Susan's got some magical powers that we don't, and that it shows up right there. But
Yeah, it's always shown there for me.
It has. Okay. Interesting. Let me show you how we would find it if it was not showing there for you. And what I did there, I'm sorry, I didn't really explain that well. In the role access, we just went all the way to the bottom. And then by that web services API manager, you can give copyrights or you can give run rights. Either is fine. Both will do what it needs to do. But to get that list ID, which we're going to need later, if I hover over the edit button, then very bottom left corner of the screen, you see that gray bar that has the SLID equals. I know it's really small on the screen share, but it's SLID equals 136604. That's how I've always had to hijack that that little snippet. And that's going to get the assignments for us. There's
I don't see the list ID there. I do see there's an ID number in the URL, but I'm not sure if that's it. I
it is
get
not.
I get
I'm wondering-
created by last modified, and I don't see a list ID.
I'm wondering if it's because I use the scripts that Scott, I think his name's Scott Yoshim, something, created that gives a lot of shortcuts.
Awesome.
So and that's what you see at the bottom where it says this site experience enhanced by on my.
Yeah. I don't see that either.
That's what does it. It may be that list ID comes from his script.
I bet that's right. So it's probably just feeding that out.
If y'all aren't using it, y'all need to use it because it's little things like if you search in People Finder, you can just hit enter. And it'll give you that first one rather than having to click. Or if you're looking up someone on the contact card, it has the little jumps to core or to academics or to, there's a bunch of little great
That's
shortcuts.
awesome. I'm going to install that today. But Matt, so when I'm hovering over the edit button within the list, at the very bottom left corner, see if you see the SLID hanging out down there.
I do. Yep.
Okay, there we go. So that's the number that we're going to snag. And I like to put it in the title thanks to Kathy's brilliant idea of making that adjustment. Or Susan, I'm going to hijack what you've done because that will save me a lot of time. So we built that list. I think for this report, I ended up building a second list. And I think that's part of the power of Power BI is we can have multiple lists that feed different data sets, and then we can combine it all together on the Power BI side. So I think we had a second list, at least on the Thayer side, that gave us the student enrollments, but let me just take a quick peek here. Yeah, so it's student class enrollments, and that one should be pretty quick to set up, but we are going to set up a second list that will end up feeding to Power BI as well. And that just saves us some pain of having to do a lot of manipulation in Power BI to harvest what we're looking for. So we're going to create one more advanced list, and we'll call this and then we'll put it into that same PBI folder. And then here, this one's a much simpler list. It is just going to be the user base. Oh, sorry. Zoom back out. Constituent information, user base. And then we're going to get the course enrollment. And then we're going to get the course group. And then we'll get the course base. And the course term. And the course faculty. And we'll tie that course faculty to the course group. I think, let's make sure that puts it in the right spot. Yeah, that looks good. And then we'll grab the user base tied to the course faculty so we can pull some teacher info out as well. And then that is going to be faculty user ID. There we go. So the second one. And then in our display, just a handful that we're pulling here, but I've got the user base, user ID. I grabbed first and last, grabbed email, just out of habit. Within the course enrollment, I'm going to go into the course group and grab the group identifier. And in the course base, we're going to grab the course title, the course term. We'll get the term description. And this just enables us to filter down if we don't want to grab every assignment. We could do things within a term, or we can do a few more other things. And then in the course faculty, I'm going to grab the first name and last name. I'll grab the ID, first name and last name. And then my filters here are going to be, just the course term school year is 22, 23, and we can tweak that year over year. And when I build these and feed to Power BI, the goal is always to make it so that Power BI will take whatever gets thrown from the list. And if I need to make adjustments to date ranges or years or other things, ideally, I want to be able to do that within core, just so you don't have to spend a ton of time in Power BI, reshuffling your filters. So if we can just be smart with our filters in core, then these are kind of year over year proof in how we can use them.
We decided later we wanted the school level also, that we thought we would want to filter by in Power BI, then we could come back and just add it in.
You got it. Absolutely. I'm going to do the same thing, and let's throw that in so we can use it. So the course enrollment dot dropped equal to 0. There we go. And then on the Thayer one, we have filtered per term or per marking period, just so it's not pulling everything all the time, but we can pull everything if that's cleaner. And then let me save this guy. We'll go through the same steps. Actually, we'll save and exit. I'm going to grab that ID. We're going to copy it, edit. We're going to paste it in here. I'll preview it. I just want to make sure we're getting something here. I think we should. And there we go. So I've got every student with all of their enrollments showing up here and the names of the teachers. Yeah, that's fine. Sometimes I'll do a filter and only pull the head teacher out instead of all teachers if there's multiple teachers tied to a course, but you can do lots of different things there. The other thing we're going to do is share this list with the same role. So that role access, I'm going to come back in. I'm going to grab that web services API manager role, save and exit. And then,
Not run.
I'm sorry?
Why copy and not run?
It makes no difference. You could do either one and it'll work just the same because all it's doing is grabbing the data from behind the scenes. I'm going to make one more edit here though, and let's grab the division as well in case we want to filter there. So we're going to select the from the course group, course base. We're going to get the school level. And that way we should be able to do some other interesting things. All right, so now my work is done in Blackbaud. So from there, there's this link. And actually, let me just share this through the chat. So this was from, I think I presented this at a Blackbaud conference maybe 5 years ago, 4 years, 5 years ago. And it just gives the actual code that we'll use to, hold on, it looks like my copy didn't work there. Yeah, I'll just grab it on my side. I think I can share it that way. So this is what we use next as we jump into Power BI and start building. And really, these few things that are showing up in orange are the things that we'll need to change in that code snippet. And we'll look at that actually right now as we jump into Power BI. So if you don't already have Power BI installed, a couple things. It has to be installed on a Windows machine. It won't run on a Mac. But once you've built a report and published it and shared it out, any user on any device in any browser can access the reporting tools, but the building has to take place on a Windows computer. So we'll jump into Power BI. And if you don't have Power BI desktop installed, it is probably a 30-second install, no cost from Microsoft, similar to Excel or Word on the installation. They charge you in 47 different ways down the line, but up front, there's no cost to get the basics. And from here, we're going to say that we want to get data. And when we get data, we're going to say we want to use a blank query as our data source. And then it takes a minute to load, but here we come.
Okay, it loaded on my other monitor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you back it over? Thank you.
There you go.
Perfect. And then from here, we're going to dive straight into the advanced editor. And I'm going to delete everything that's there. And then we're going to actually jump back over to Susan's browser. And we're going to just copy this code snippet exactly as is here. And actually, I'm not sure if I can copy. Yeah, all right, looks like I can. So I'm going to copy, come into the advanced editor, and I'll just paste that. And this is where we're going to start inserting the pieces that are unique to each school and to each list. So the key I'm going to grab. And then we'll pop that in as the username. And then the secret, I'm going to grab. And that's the password. The source, your school name is whatever comes before.
I'm sorry, you need to add a 4 at you didn't grab the 4 on the password.
Oh, that it will be an important number. Thank you. All right. That would have thrown me off and it would have taken a while to find it. Thank you for catching that. So we'll throw the 4 at the end. Perfect. And then the, oops. No, what am I looking for? Sorry. Where's your site? There we go. So it's just Ensworth in this case. So I'm going to grab that string that comes before .myschoolapp. And there's 2 spots that we're going to update that. So your school name becomes, and your school name becomes Ensworth. And then your list ID is the actual list from within the Blackbaud system that we're looking at. So I'm going to start with the major assignments, that 136604. I'm going to say done, and then data is now flowing through the API. So very first time I do it, it's going to say information's required about data privacy. I'll just say continue. I'll say ignore privacy levels, which is scary, but the only thing that's shared through this is that specific set of lists that's been shared with the Web Services Manager API. So those are the only pieces of data that could potentially flow through this. And then we wait a second. 10. And that's a big list. So it was 55,000 rows, I think. So it'll take just a minute to grab it. There we go. Once we're here, I've got these instructions outlined in that link as well. But from here, all we're going to do is click this little double arrow up top. and that'll expand those columns and just take it from, you know, this meaningless thing to basically a snapshot of the list as it lives right now in Blackbaud. A lot of times I'll end up renaming the column headers in the list in Blackbaud to be something more meaningful than the defaults. So using that text box beside the list output. But these ones are pretty clean. In this case, I've got first name, last name, first name one, last name one. I know that one is student. I know that one is teacher, but sometimes I'll put like T first, T last, just as a way to differentiate. I always uncheck that box. It just creates an extra thread that's not particularly useful. Use original column name as prefix. And then I'll say, okay. And then I'll be staring at exactly the same list as we had within Blackbaud. And I know a lot of this is scary, and it's, you know, we've spent almost 40 minutes kind of going through these initial steps. But once you've got the initial plumbing in place, you can just grind through them. Kathy Steinman, I've probably worked with more on the Power BI building than anybody else. And when she and I need a list, it takes about 3 minutes to build it and feed it in. So a lot of the legwork is up front. And then once it's done, it's done. So from here, I'm going to rename that, and we'll just call this major assignments. Oops, I could spell. Yeah.
I definitely cheat by having Matt help me. Like, it's sort of like learning how to ride a bike. He gets me going, and then we take the training wheels off, and then I just go. But you know, these are the training wheels. But once you get there, the heavy lift is done, and you fly.
All right, so it's renaming. Yeah, it's just a big data set. So generally they don't take quite this long to load because normally we're not pulling 50,000+ rows. Couple things we'll tweak is this date due by default, and this is kind of where we get into some of the Power BI, you know, stickiness, for lack of a better word. But once we figure out a couple of things, we can do a lot of things. We just need to tell it that that's actually a date and not a text value. So if I click that ABC123, I'm going to tell it that that is a date time entry, and then it'll be able to do date time type things with it. And then we'll scroll over and see if there's any other date time entries in there. There we go. So now it's showing it as a date. We'll scroll over to the right. Everything else looks pretty clean. Excellent. We've got that school level feeding in now as well. Sometimes if we're adding or subtracting or multiplying or, you know, doing any sort of math things, we'll convert things from like ABC123 to a numeric. But in this case, the user ID as is just fine. So now I've got that major assignments data feeding in. I'm going to go grab that second list, and you'll see how quick that is. So I've built this guy. I'm just going to hit copy. I'm going to hit paste. And then this will become the student enrollments. So we're going to make a couple tweaks. And I'm going to go straight to the advanced editor here. And we're going to adjust that. I think it was 10. And then this gets a little wonky as well. But what I'm going to need to do is delete everything after this converted to table row, because the column headers are going to be different, and the other steps of the transformation, changing it to a date time, are going to be different in this list than what we've got in the other. So I'm going to go back to that converted to table, or you could copy and paste that same text snippet that I'd shared in that link and get to the same spot. But this way you've got the key, you've got the secret, and you've got the domain already baked in. And then I'll just replicate what we had there. And now I'll say done. I'll do the same expansion. It should be much quicker this time just because there's less data flowing. I'll say okay. And now I've got these two data sets that are connected to the Blackbaud database. So let's save this guy. And Susan, okay if I put it in your downloads for now? And then we'll just say we want to apply the changes. So when I do that, now it's going to go refresh that data one more time. So once it's saved, it likes to go refresh itself again. Take a second, but then the fun really begins. So we've done the hard part of going and getting the data, and now we can do all kinds of cool stuff with it. And actually, it's possible that we may fail here. There may be one setting where it may be trying to load those in parallel on the back end, but we do not want that to happen. We want it to load one before it loads the other, just so that it won't crash. It's a Blackbaud restriction, but we'll see in just a second what that looks like. Yeah, all right, so let's do that. So we got that failure. There's one setting within file, options and settings, and then I think it's in options where we do not want to allow parallel loading of tables. So number of simultaneous evaluations, I'm going to say 1. Nope, actually, it might be a setting in the current file. There we go. We'll go into the current file, parallel loading of tables. I'll just say 1 here. So if I'm pulling 2 data sets in, that's a critical piece. Otherwise, it'll fail. But if I force it through the data load to use the 1, then that should work for us. And then I bet I broke it up here. Yeah, I'll just leave that back at the 4 that it was before. But in this file, in this current file section, under data load, I'm going to just say 1. I'll say okay. And then we should be in good shape. So at that point, we've built the list, we've written the code in PowerBI, we're pulling data, we'll close and apply. And then over at the far right-hand side now, we're going to see these 2 little data sets that are available for us to use. And it's doing a fresh evaluation. We should see one fully load before the other one starts with that setting we just updated. And this is part of why, the load time may want to consider, just restricting the date range of what we're pulling, because this grabbed every major assignment for the year, where maybe they're only concerned with, things happening, this week, this month, next month. All right, so it's coming. And what we'll do next is actually start building. So all this is just getting the plumbing in place. And then the fun begins. There we go. So we've got that information there. I like to do a couple things just to make it easier for us to connect the data between these 2 tables. So I'm going to build a, let's see. I'm looking back at another similar one, a class section field in this, we'll do first in the student enrollments, where I'm going to concatenate the course code, or I'm sorry, the course title with the section identifier just so I can uniquely identify the sections without having to pull from multiple spots. And so I right-clicked and chose new column. And then this is where Power BI just becomes insanely powerful. I'm going to call this class section equals course title. And then I'll throw a space dash space, and then another and then the group identifier. Whoops. So that's created a new, or will create a new column that I can use in my reporting. And I think, let me see, that might be everything that we need. So a couple more things I'll do in here is I'm going to create a couple new columns, one that's got the student full name, one that's got the teacher full name. I'll just say that's the last name. Did I pull the student first or the teacher first? No, I pulled the student first. So that's going to be the last name 1 and first name 1. And I'll do the same thing for the teacher name. So it just prevents me from having to do a lot of legwork later and stitching things together. And a lot of the code is very, very, very similar to Excel. Some of it's slightly different, but Google is excellent at helping guide you. Okay, so I've got a student name and I've got a teacher name. Let's start building. So this is the fun. So we're gonna just throw in a filter that says the date due is the field that I want to use in my filter. And it's gonna, let me do all kinds of stuff. I'm gonna leave that alone for now, but we'll end up using that in just a minute. We're gonna put out, let me just find, sorry, I'm looking back at another report just so I can kind of get my structure in place. I'm gonna build, and this is kind of Power BI super crash course. I've had zero training in Power BI. I just spend a lot of time Googling when I'm trying to figure things out. And the internet is really good at providing, hints at where to go. So I've now spent thousands of hours in it. So I can do a lot of the stuff pretty quickly, but it is a fairly steep learning curve to get started. But I'm going to build a matrix, which is basically just a pivot table equivalent in Excel. And I'm going to build a matrix where I'm going to pull my student name as my rows. And then we're feeding data from Blackbaud. And then I'm going to show my my dates. I'm not going to let me change my format on my date just so it doesn't come out with a big ugly time tied to it. So I'm changing the format of that field. I'm going to put those as my columns. And actually, I'll just say use the actual date rather than the date hierarchy where I can do year and month and quarter and day. And then I'm going to tell it to give me a, as my values, I'm just going to do a distinct count of the user ID. Actually, in this case, I think just a count. So I can see that on that date, there were 116 total major assignments due. We're going to tie together a couple other things. Let's actually jump down below here. Let's change that slicer to be a little more meaningful and say maybe just, I'm sorry, my dog's trying to tear down the door. I'll be right back.
For those of you who are freaking out just a little bit. Matt makes this look really easy, but I just wanted to show you, I put a link in the chat a little ways up. I'm taking screenshots as he's going along of the Thayer versions, and I put them into a Google folder. You can take your time and go look there. Don't worry about trying to write it all down now. Okay.
Awesome. And I'll share the recording out and, go to the spot and kind of go from there. But yes, thank you, John. So then from here, I'm going to put in a little table. So the matrix is showing me, which students have a major assignment on which date. Then where it really starts to get some value and some utility is I'm going to put a table down below where I'm going to output, who the student is, grad year, division, due date, who the teacher is, which course it is, what the assignment name is, some of those types of details. So I can, as a teacher, I can see a lot of that information. So we'll throw in, let's see, student name. We're going to throw in grad year or grade level. You can use the user register to get a grade level if that's more useful. We'll output that due date. And it defaults to this funky year, quarter, month, day. But generally, I just like to tell it to show me the actual date itself. I'll put the teacher name and the course title. And so you see where these student name and teacher names just save you some pain of not having a column for teacher first, teacher last, but it just makes it pretty quick and easy. We'll grab the course title. And then we'll get the assignment brief. And then actually we'll do a couple more things. So let me just look at one more piece on my other file and how I tied this together. What did I use as my link? We said it is just linked by user ID. All right, excellent. So again, one more piece of plumbing on the back end, because I want my student enrollments to tie back to my major assignments piece. I need to tell the system that this data can be linked on the back end. To cross filter the data from both sets into the report. So it'll make more sense once I show you what this will do. So that user ID, oops. And I'm trying to remember. So my user ID one, let's see. Tell me I grabbed the user ID. Come on, Matt. Yes, I did. Okay, good. And I think that was the student user ID. I'm going to link it to user ID 1, which is the student user ID in my other one. So if I do a more careful job of naming them coming out of Blackbaud, it makes it much easier for me to know what's what coming in. So I'll just say that user ID ties to that user ID. It'll ask me a bunch of questions about, table linking. In this case, just the default is fine. I'm going to say, okay. But as Kathy and I spend a lot of time sorting through where and how we need to tweak a lot of those settings. Once we've got that in place, I can start doing some really cool stuff where if I wanted to see, let's put a filter in for, let me just see what other filters we may want to look at there. I'll put in a teacher name and a class section as a filter here. So I'm going to add a slicer. And I'm going to throw the teacher name. Oops. And I'm going to make that a little more useful. We'll just tell it that that's going to be a drop down. So then I'm also going to tell it that it's searchable. And then I'm going to jump up here, pull that up here. I'm going to just copy this slicer and just paste it. And rather than using teacher name this time, I'm going to grab that other class section field that we built. So we'll tell it to use class section there. It'll hold on to those settings. So now here we go. So if I go into a teacher, if I want to see as a teacher, the kids in my class, I can see that these students on these dates have major assignments. Any dates where they do not have a major assignment will not show up here. If I want to see what are those 40 major assignments that these kids have, I can click into that and it'll adjust my table down below to show me the that information. So across a couple different, looks like arts classes, it looks like something big is due in art. Maybe I consider that in determining whether I'm going to use that date for a assignment that I'm giving. Or I could look at a date that is not marked in here and go from there. Similarly, if I wanted to look at just a specific class, oops, let me go into my class sections. Why do I have nothing? It's no good. Let me just look at that code. I should be able to use that. Let me just get rid of that from here, and I'm going to add the course title, maybe, and just see if we can start to get there. But you can see the kind of where and how.
Why would you pull it from the student enrollments and not from the major assignments?
So because I want it to look at I want the major assignments for me as a teacher to show the classes that my students who are enrolled in my class have another major assignment due. So basically I want to look at their other side of it. And actually, hold on, as I'm saying that, let me just see where I'm pulling that from. Yeah.
Then you want it to pull the course titles based on what the student is enrolled in, not all the course titles that there's major assignments in.
Correct. Exactly right. Yeah. Let me just apply changes because I'm wondering if it's just not actually linked on the back end. But I think that's where a lot of the power comes in, is that ability to cross-link the data. And then I think you can see you can go a million different ways with this. So this is looking at major assignments, but have built 8,000 versions of attendance reporting and attendance summaries and grade distribution and grade inflation over time, and teachers within a course do some grade easier than others, student grades by athletic participation, breakdowns by department of average grades, and just layers and layers and layers. If you can build a list in Blackbaud, then you can build a report in PowerBI. It's kind of the long and short of it. All right, I don't know. All right.
When we talked about the student or the school level, would you put that as a slicer, or would you put that somewhere else?
Great question. I would put that as a slicer. So let's throw it in right now and we'll see that come into play. And we've got the option here to bake some filters into the entire page or the entire visual. So I may want to create a version of this that is middle school only. May want to create a separate version that's upper school only. And I could bake that in right here. All right, so let's see now if we can, let's do that and see if that one will cooperate. I don't know why my teacher name is working. That's fine. But my course title is not. Yeah, still nothing. That's weird. Okay, but let's see if we can get the division. Which one do we put that in? I think we put that in the school level. There we go. Let's say we just want to see the high school. And I can have these check boxes are nice, or drop downs are great if I'm looking for a specific thing. But let's tighten that up a little. I must have something off on the linking on the back end. The fact that that course titles. Let me just make sure that relationship. Yeah, maybe it is user ID to user ID. Let me just see if I messed that up. I just can't remember which that was. So in looking at the actual raw data, nah, it doesn't tell me anything. I bet that's it, because that's the one place I'm going across the page. Let me try that. And then let's see if that brings us anything useful. There we go. Yep, I just had it screwed up on my linking. So if I'm looking for, I don't know, AP, AP Calc, I could look at that course. I could look at, you know, a date. I could see who the students are that have a major assignment on that date, and I can see what course they have that major assignment in. So I do need to run in a couple of minutes here, but I wanted to say I've got to get my kids to swim team practice at 4 o'clock. But wanted to show, you know, in an hour, we can go pretty quickly from start to finish of having something. And then there's just a million different levels that we could take this to. Let's save this. This will be the.
Well, you did in the first 45 minutes what it took me combined a total of, I don't know, 3 or 4 days to figure out. So
There's so many gotchas that, you know, once you figure them out, it's a quick fix, but you have to know, you know, where they are.
How do you display this information for teachers?
Excellent question. So we could spend another hour looking at that, but there's an option here to publish these files. So I'm building it on, or we're building it on Susan's local machine right now. If we publish it out, then Microsoft gives about 46 different ways to do things with it. So we can publish it to Microsoft's online Power BI service. If we are using a free license, we can push it out, and then we could potentially just create a link to it directly. It's not my favorite solution, but for something like this, doesn't kill me. There's not a ton of personal information that's going out there. Anything where I'm given potentially personal information, I would have any user who's accessing these tools log into Microsoft's Power BI service and access it through that portal. Microsoft charges $2 to $3 per user per month to use that service. So if you've got, you know, 10 people on campus, it's, you know, a few $100 a year. But as soon as you start trying to go beyond a relatively small number of users, that number grows a little bit. Maybe your Microsoft agreement has that Power BI access site license. I've seen that a handful of times, but more often than not, it comes out to like $25 a user a year to have access to the online versions of the reports. And
Is there any, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is there any way to set it to refresh automatically, or do you have
Abs-
some? There is? Okay, that's why I couldn't figure out. Okay.
Yes, and that's the beauty of it. So here I can hit refresh, but once I've published it out to the Power BI service, I've got the option within Power BI to set those parameters to refresh up to 8 times a day. So I can set, you know, which times I want it to refresh. Ton of the admissions reporting work that I do, they want hourly updates kind of throughout the course of the school day on, you know, what's happening, who deposited, you know, what's our net tuition look like, you know, 1,000 different things. How many new inquiries came in this morning? Those types of things. Something like this, you know, maybe we'll just set it to refresh at 7 a.m. every day, and that might be enough. All right, so I do need to run, but I will share this recording out with everybody. And please reach out if anybody has questions as you're getting started. I'd be happy to hop on a quick Zoom and get you up and running. And then as a shameless plug, this is what I do for a living. So I'd be happy to work with anybody if you want some assistance diving into these things.
Thank you so much, Matt.
awesome.
All right, thanks so much, guys. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks.